Alright, yeah, and welcome back to some more Magic Arena, and this week we're going to be saying goodbye to the Kaladesh format in style with a hell of a lot of cards that are not going to survive rotation. So, pretty much, I went out on a Twitter poll a couple of weeks back, asked you guys what kind of stuff you want to see before Guilds of Ravnica comes out, and it was basically a mix between rotation-proof decks and decks that are not going to survive at all. So we've basically done the rotation-proof deck last week, and this week we're going to be doing one that is not going to survive in the slightest. In fact, it will die immediately in a couple of weeks. So it is a fun one though. So let's get into it, shall we? We're going to be playing Mono Black Panharmonicon. So Mono Black Panharmonicon is based around the card Panharmonicon. 4-mana artifact. It says, if an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a trigger ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. That word soup essentially says, enter the battlefield triggers twice. So things with the phrase enters the battlefield are going to happen twice. Gonti is my favourite card of the enters the battlefield, because it actually allows us to see standard out in style, because we get to play with our opponent's deck. So this is the kind of thing that we want to be casting after a Panharmonicon. So we're going to be going for a mono black value kind of deck with a few little Mimi cards in here, because it wouldn't be a deck that I've built without a few intentionally bad Mimi cards in it. So Gonti is a non-bad card. 4 mana for a 2/3 with Death Touch, so it blocks everything. Legendary, which is sad. You might see 4 copies in here. I don't mind legend ruling this card with a Panharmonicon in play, because I get to replace a lot in the process. So it says, look at the top 4 cards of our opponent's library. We get to exile one of them face down, and then put the rest on the bottom of the library in a random order. You may look at that card and cast it for as long as it remains exiled. You may spend mana as though it was any colour of any type to cast that spell. So we don't need to splash colours to use Gonti. In order to cast our opponent's cards, we basically just get to pick from 4. Pick the best one. We can't pick lands. Well, we can pick lands, but we can't play them, because it is a cast, not a play. So that's something to be aware of. So we basically take our opponent's creatures, our opponent's planeswalkers, our opponent's removal. Gonti hits it all. And if we get the double trigger, then we get to look at 8 cards. If we get another Panharmonicon, then we get to look at 12 cards. So we get a really nice selection with Gonti, and he's honestly one of my favourite things to play after a Panharmonicon. So down at the bottom, we have things like Dust Legion Zealot. It is a 2-mana 1/1 with enters the battlefield, draws a card, loses 1 life. So Panharmonicon doubles that up. We draw 2 cards for 2 mana with a 1/1 body attached. That's pretty sweet value. Kitesail Freebooter is a pretty fun one. 2 mana 1/2 with Flyer. This is essentially our duress on a stick. With Panharmonicon, it has extra abilities as well. Essentially, we get to take a non-creature card from our opponent's hand until Kitesail Freebooter leaves the field. But with Panharmonicon, we get to take 2 cards instead, so we get to repeat that. Kitesail can often, in a control matchup, when Panharmonicon's being resolved, just completely empty your opponent's hand. It is pretty funny when it happens, and we all pretty much just need to blank our opponent's cards long enough to just beat down, so it's not too much of a problem that our opponent will eventually get those cards back. Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot is essentially copies 5 and 6 of Dust Legion Zealot. 2 mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and lose 1 life, so same ability as Dust Legion Zealot. And Panharmonicon triggers on artifacts entering the battlefield as well. So it does literally exactly the same thing. However, it does have the added ability of 2 and a black to sacrifice it, draw a card, and lose 1 life. I do believe the Dust Legion Zealots to be better than the Puzzle Knots. The Puzzle Knots can draw you an extra card, sure, but Dust Legion Zealots are an early game blocker that allows you to survive later on into the game, and maybe beat down if it comes to it as well. As for our removal, we're running 2 copies of Cast Down to destroy non-legendary creatures. It's been reasonable, I suppose. I'm not sure if I like it all too much, but it's been doing a job just fine. We also have 1 copy of Walk the Plank as well, because nobody plays Merfolk, so this is essentially a 2-mana sorcery, kill any creature. And I think that's a little better than Murder, to be honest. Killing something on 2 guaranteed is pretty cool. Its sorcery is going to be a problem sometimes, but not most of the time. Onto the Mimi card, we've got Izareth the Awakener. Pretty fun card, all the same. 1 and 2 black for a 3/3 with Death Touch. When she attacks, you may pay X, and when you do, return target creature card with converted mana cost X from your graveyard to the battlefield with a corpse counter on it, blah blah blah, the rest of it doesn't matter. So essentially, Izareth can reanimate any of our creatures, and obviously with all of our creatures having enter the battlefield effects, she's going to be able to do something on the attack. Like Gonti maybe can get me a removal spell or a counter spell, which can pave the way for my attackers. I've actually had that being a situation before. Izareth has grabbed Gonti. Gonti's come back, grabbed a removal spell. I used that removal spell to kill my opponent's blocker, and I've swung for lethal when I otherwise didn't actually have lethal, which is really funny. So she can do some fun stuff. She's really good when Panharmonicon is in play as well, because obviously everything that she grabs back is going to be doing double duty. Filigree Familiar is another card as well to survive the early game. 3 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, we gain 2 life. We gain extras with Panharmonicon. And when it dies, we get to draw a card as well, which makes it a great blocker versus aggro, because we gain life when it comes into play, which aggro does not like. And we are happy to block with it because we get to draw a card and gain advantage, which might actually get us the removal spell, which aggro does not like. So, got some good aggro stuff here. We kind of really do like the life game because we do have a lot of painful card draw in Dust Legion Zealot and Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot. So, gaining the life on the Filigree Familiar is reasonably important. But other than that, we've got other stuff. Ravenous Chupacabra is 4 mana 2/2. Enters the battlefield, kills a creature, can kill 2 with 1 Panharmonicon, kill 3 with 3 blah 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 blah. More Panharmonicons means more killing. You end up getting double value. Lots of fun. Vraska's Contempt, because Planeswalkers are a big problem for us. We can't really touch them. So Vraska's Contempt is kind of necessary to make sure that that happens. We do have other ways of dealing with Planeswalkers, but for the most part, it's another bit of life gain and removal. Killing indestructible creatures is also an issue, so Vraska's Contempt got that one covered. Noxious Gearhulk is essentially our turbocharged Chupacabra. 6 mana for a 5/4 with Menace. It's an artifact creature, which is relevant because a Braid is still in the format, so that is a 2 mana removal spell for Noxious Gearhulk. However, we get value as soon as this one enters the battlefield, most likely, because when it enters the battlefield, we get to destroy a creature and then gain life equal to its toughness. Yet again, it's going to be pretty much negating all of the damage that Dust Legion Zealot and Puzzle Knot are going to be dealing to us, because we're going to gain a fair bit of life back with this deck. Double duty, if we can make that work. Meteor Golem. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, this is another meme card. He's on about this meme card right here. This is actually pretty awesome, to be honest. We've got ways of getting to it reasonably cheaply, and we can cast multiples in a turn later on in the game. You might see that card hovering at the bottom of Meteor Golem there. That's kind of how we actually managed to get this mana. But Meteor Golem is essentially a 7 mana 3/3, which is awful. When it enters the battlefield, though, we get to destroy target non-land permanent and opponent controls. So Planeswalkers, enchantments, artifacts, creatures. We cannot kill artifacts and enchantments in black. So Meteor Golem is our answer to that. And he also allows us to kill Planeswalkers at the same time. So he's kind of our 4th and 5th copy of Vraska's Contempt in that sense. So we got Cabal Stronghold. Cabal Stronghold benefits from swamps. So we're going to be trying to run as many as we can. This is why we're not running that many colorless cards, colorless land cards, because Cabal Stronghold gets 1 black for each basic swamp you control. We need to have 5 swamps in play in order for Cabal Stronghold to net us mana here, because we have to pay 3 and tap the Cabal Stronghold, which essentially, if you had 4 swamps in play and you tap the 3 and the Cabal Stronghold, you're just going to make 4 mana anyway. So you need 5 swamps in play to net mana, but once we do, we start, essentially, Cabal Stronghold turns all of our swamps into double land drops, so that's kind of the idea. 20 swamps, 1 detection tower. This is my answer to Vinemare, because as I've found out that Vinemare is a disgusting card against us, because it's not only hexproof, so it's hard to deal with from our removal, but it also has unblockable by black creatures. Black creatures cannot block Vine Mare, which makes it impossible to deal with. So Detection Tower actually allows us to remove the hexproof, allows us to take care of things like Carnage Tyrant as well. Without hexproof, we can start targeting with all of our removal, our Contempts, our Gear Hulks, anything like that. So we really, if we're going up against mono green, we want to be able to hit Detection Tower to make sure that we've got that. I've killed so many Carnage Tyrants with this deck, it is unreal. So hitting Detection Tower is pretty sweet. And it doesn't really hurt the deck all that much, because we're running 3 Cabal Strongholds. I could run 4, but honestly I found myself hitting Cabal Strongholds too much, and they obviously don't pump each other because they're not swamps or basics. So 3 seems like the sweet spot for this deck, honestly. You don't want too many because they're technically colourless lands in the early game, and we want all of the double mana we can get. So that's the main board. If we go to the sideboard, we have a little trouble with control. So as is the usual control package, we have 4 copies of Duress, 1 black mana to make our opponent reveal their hand, and then we get to choose a non-creature, which could be a counterspell, planeswalker, removal spell, anything of that sort, combat trick, and we get to discard it. So it's really good for making sure that all of our stuff resolves. We do already have 3 copies of Kitesail Freebooter, but Kitesail Freebooter will give our opponent the card back if it dies, which eventually it probably will. 3 copies of Sentinel Totem to allow us to deal with graveyard synergies, because Scarab God is an obnoxious card, and honestly, we have a lot of creatures worth reanimating. So it's basically to take care of that kind of thing. We also have an extra ability as well. You might be saying, why are you running Silent Gravestone? Because Sentinel Totem actually has a scry when it enters the battlefield, which actually has some synergy with Panharmonicon, because we can scry 1 twice. So there's some nice synergy there. I don't know if it actually ends up being worth it in the end, but we're going to try it out. We're going to have some fun. That's what we're all about here. 2 copies of Gifted Aetherborn, both for the green decks as well, to take care of Carnage Tyrants and things like that. The Death Touch is kind of relevant. Stonewalling our opponent with a Death Touching Lifelinker is pretty sweet, but it's also here for aggro as well, because the life gain is awesome. 2 copies of Sorcerer's Spyglass is a 2 mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you look at your opponent's hand, then you get to choose a card name, and the activated abilities of sources with the chosen card name can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. So we can name Planeswalkers. That is the primary purpose of Sorcerer's Spyglass. I always include Sorcerer's Spyglass because Teferi is awful, and I would like any opportunity for him to not be useful. So that's one reason for running Sorcerer's Spyglass. You can also run it against Scarab God as well. You can stop Scarab God from being able to be activated. You can still cast it, but it's just a 5/5 on the board with a Spyglass in play, so kind of nice. 2 copies of Lost Legacy for combo decks. We can name all sorts with this thing. I actually came up against Rat Colony once before, and naming Rat Colony with Lost Legacy is usually just GG. 1 and 2 black, sorcery speed. You name a non-artifact, non-land card name. Search that player's graveyard, hand, library for any number of cards with that name. Exile them. Any problematic card for us, like Vine Mare is a good name for Lost Legacy because it's such a problem card for us. So being able to name that. They will draw a card if it is in their hand, but they're probably not going to draw into anything as good as the card that you're trying to remove. Most of the time when you're playing Lost Legacy, though, you want to play it in a situation where if it resolves, it wins you the game. Lost Legacy can name Planeswalkers in, like, Turbo Fog. In fact, you can just name Nexus of Fate in Turbo Fog and things like that, which will probably just win you the game. It's very difficult to get out from under stuff like that, so bring it in when it will very likely win you the game upon resolution. That's usually how you play it. 2 copies of Yehene's Expertise to finish it all off as well. All creatures get -3/-3 until the end of the turn. You get to cast a converted mana cost 3 or less card from your hand without paying its mana cost. Bring it in against aggro. That is the usual strategy. Because a lot of our deck doesn't do a great deal until turn 4, I would really like to undo all of my opponent's first 3 plays with a Yehene's Expertise. That is kind of the plan. Used to have Bontu's Last Reckoning in here, but I felt like the mana lockdown was a little bit of a problem, so we're going to run this one instead, and it's obviously better than Golden Demise as well, because it has that extra little bit of damage. So that is going to be the deck anyway, guys. I do hope you've all enjoyed. If you have, make sure to like, subscribe, check out the matches that shall be following on the end card. Right now, there should already be a video live as well, if you haven't already clicked and watched it. I hope you enjoy the games that are coming up this week, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.